Okay, welcome to week 4. This week puts us halfway through. At the end of this week, we're halfway through this class. Um, you can see on the list, what I've done is once a week is finished, I'll move it to the bottom. It doesn't disappear, but you can see in our lessons plan. So as week 3 finishes, I'll move it. Week 4 will jump to the front. The other thing that's going to jump up is the midterm exam. That's part of week 4. And it'll become available a little bit earlier than the quizzes, like Tuesday of that week. And you can see at the last page of the syllabus, November 4th to 7th. So there's a bigger window to take it. It is a little bit longer, but it ended up being 45 multiple choice true and false, and then 3 kind of short answer questions. So just like a quiz as far as format goes, just a little bit longer, and with that you get 2 hours, 120 minutes to take it. Okay, so I don't think it'll be too bad. Just give yourself time to do it. Don't start it at 11:15 and you only got 45 minutes before the clock runs out. Let's see what else. Oh, and talking about the midterm, I'm maybe jumping around just a little bit. What I've done, I mentioned it in one of the previous videos, this quizzes and tests folder. Now from my side, I can see them both. From your side, not yet. But as of the beginning of next week, once everyone's taken the quiz, quiz number 2, they're in that folder, quizzes and tests. And what you can do is open those up, and it's the quiz itself with the correct answer. Now some of the essays that are opinion-based, I can't really do much, so it'll just say answers vary. But you guys remember what you wrote for those. So those 2 pieces would be good to study. I would go back through and look at any notes I've taken. I'd go back through and look at the words of the day from the various slides. I wouldn't go through all the slides. That would take far too long. But if you just hit some of the words of the day, those key concepts, and the same with the chapters. The thing you'll find as you move through college is you can't, in preparation for a midterm or final exam, do all the work that you maybe should have done in the lead up to it. It's more brushing up. And that's what the quizzes should help. You may see a couple. I don't know that they'll be verbatim, but if you know the answer and why the answer is what it is, then you've got the concept. And so the question could change a little bit and you'll still get it right. All right. One more I'm going to harp on. I'm just not getting a lot on the discussion board. Remember, the discussion board, it's not voluntary. It's supposed to be part of the class, and it's one of the things that in an online situation sort of tries to make up for us being able to discuss things in person. We can't do that except on the chat, and I've had a few chat folks, but not a lot. But notice this leadership discussion, which runs out, I'm doing this Sunday morning, but it runs out soon, and we don't have a whole bunch of participation on that, right? So can I force you? I can't force you to do anything, but I can put the grade in associated with not doing the discussion boards. Just like in the grade center, right? If something's late, I'm going to put it in as a 0. It doesn't mean it's a 0 unless the late window expires, right? 3 days and there's a late penalty. There was a couple folks last week that turned stuff in late, but it was well done and they got some points taken off for being late, but they still got credit for it. So that's always better than a 0. Zeros are terrible for your grade, okay? And if you remember from the syllabus, I drop 1. Either a quiz or a worksheet. But if you have a bunch of zeros in worksheets, it'll help a little bit, but not a lot. So you don't want that. Right? And I've said it before, B-term, compressed semester schedule, you get behind in a heartbeat. And some of you are. Enough of that. What else? No, I think that's it for kind of a tech time. Prepping for the midterm. So moving into this step, this one's a little bit odd. I mean, not odd, but it contains a few bits and pieces, and I try to introduce a little bit more time management and stress that we started with the very beginning of the class, and we're going to build on that. And then when we get to week 6, before Thanksgiving, we're going to talk one more round of time management because that's one of the key traits to success. And some of you have said, what are my weaknesses, or what do I need to work on, or what am I worried about? And time management seems to always come up. So we're going to hit that in kind of 3 pieces, right? So I haven't done this before. Maybe I should. slide this over there. These are the learning objectives from step 3, this working with the team piece. This comes straight out of the textbook, right? You can see how communication is a huge part of this. In fact, it's almost half of it. Then we roll into critical thinking. So communications, critical thinking, they go together, but maybe they don't, in your mind, they seem like an odd couple. And then dealing with failure and mistakes in a positive manner. That's why, not in this video, but the next. And by the way, I think I'm only going to do 2 for this week, for week 4. 2 videos, 2 sets of slides. There's 1 worksheet, but there's no discussion board. Okay, so I may have that wrong on one of the slides, but you'll see it in the lessons. In fact, I'll correct it as we get to it. So this idea of making mistakes, how to do things in relationships, stress goes along with that. And the last thing we'll talk about in the next video is this idea of diversity and how diversity can help or hinder groups and how they function. Now, nobody ever, I mean, that's almost politically incorrect to say diversity can be a problem. Generally, no. But I've seen it actually in cases where it can be, okay? As enforced, or diversity that doesn't. The idea is it's supposed to help by bringing in multiple ideas. Sometimes it can stifle. All right. So let's see. Did I get this? Yeah, I did. Let me fix it on the fly. There is a worksheet, and it has to do with ethical dilemmas. So that kind of melds these things together. Critical thinking, stress. Ethical dilemmas are tough choices that have to be made. And I'll mention it now. The worksheet has 5 scenarios, if you will. Pick one of those to write about. You don't have to do all 5, but they're each one an ethical dilemma in some form or fashion. Okay, and so the end of week 4 is the midterm test, and we just talked about how to prep for that. Okay, critical thinking. What is it? We introduced that idea, if you remember back to Kahneman and thinking fast and slow, and how we're oftentimes on mental autopilot. That the brain's just kind of running. We're driving someplace, and halfway there we go, oh, I'm going somewhere else. I'm just on autopilot. That's a piece of critical thinking. Being objective, bringing in multiple aspects, multiple opinions on a subject. Right? Being fact-based, not opinion-based. Here's the definition. That's brutal, isn't it? Yeah, and you'll never see that on a test. But there's a couple key words in here that I think are important. And what I end up talking about, critical thinking, is it's a mash of all these different ideas. That's why you get asked 100 professors, you'll get 100 different answers, and probably half of them don't even know what critical thinking is. But it's a discipline process. That's why you have to really think. You have to shift into that system 2, Kahneman, not autopilot, but actually thinking, so it's active. Clarity, accuracy, sound evidence, i.e. fact, i.e. objectivity. Okay, depth and breadth, not what did Google tell me the answer was, right? So that's a long definition, but some key words in it. And what it's not, and if you want to watch the Blue Star video, it's from an English comedy group, it's not just arguing. Some people make that mistake. Well, if I'm arguing with you, it must be critical thinking. No, Sean Hannity doesn't critically think. So elements of, let's kind of mash this together, as I said. So we've already talked about some of these. And so I hope this makes more sense as we get to the finish line. The ability to use our knowledge is wisdom. So all the things from experience, from reading, from watching other people, that gives us knowledge, but how do we use it? So that's a piece. And I think critical thinking allows us to do this, that you go, remember the word skeptical? It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you go, I don't know. That sounds kind of bogus to me. So I'm going to dig into it. And we could use more of this as well. Don't just blindly follow what you read on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg's got a lot of authority in the social media world. I don't trust him any further than I could throw him. Right? I just mentioned this. System 2, Kahneman. Remember the bat and the ball question? Bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? And your brain screamed at you 10 cents, which was wrong. Right? We have to force ourselves into thinking deeply. Not only that, but the Procon website, if you remember back, we were talking about electronic libraries. There is actually a website about pro and con that brings in both sides of an argument on whatever it was. I think we use medical marijuana as the example to drive through it. You do the same thing. You actually do this yourself when you're coming up with a big decision. Well, oftentimes we think about it as like purchasing a car, something that costs a lot of money. You look at the pros and cons of different vehicles, gas mileage, reliability, things like that. And what it does is that we can at least help. This should ring a bell. The ability to set our own agendas. What does that sound like? Well, it should sound like internal locus of control. That we have more control over our lives because we're more informed. We can make better decisions. We're not putting out fires or trying to fix things that have been screwed up by kind of sloppy decision making. Okay, this one I'm going to come back to, media literacy, because I think that's part of critical thinking as well, especially in the world of social media. And I use this, you're like, okay, it looks like a quote. It is. Where did it come from? We don't know yet, but you're going to hear it in a minute. And it comes from a guy named Carl Sagan. He did the original version of Cosmos back in the 1980s. Critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true. That's what happens when critical thinking declines. And I would argue, look around you. It's there. We're there. Come on, baby. Okay. Some other thoughts on this. Again, the step 3 started with a bunch of communication pieces. I'm hitting critical thinking first because I think it get this under our belts and then get into the communication process makes more sense. Understand this. We talk ad nauseum about critical thinking, but not every decision demands it. Some things you just decide and move on. Okay? Time is part of critical thinking. That's why the time management piece re-engaged here. The more time you have, especially on important decisions, the better those decisions will be. If your time management is poor and you have very little time and you've got a big decision and you have to make it and you snap to that decision, that's oftentimes where bad decisions are made, right? If you remember from, I think it was the last video, step 2, about the OODA loop and that idea of observe, orient, decide, act. One of the things I saw in a couple of the worksheets was the fear of making a decision, right? And I said, yes, do the best you can to gather all the information, make that decision, but then OODA loop it. Go back and go, okay, is it working? Go back into the observation mode. It's working great, good. It's not working great, what can I tweak? It was a terrible decision, maybe I need to start again. But we keep gathering information. So that's part of critical thinking as well. And this idea of a T-chart, I'm not going to draw it on here, but I kind of just described it. If you take a piece of paper and you draw a T, and on the top of the T, the top line, you put the decision. I said, buy a new car or buy a used car, buy a car. How about that? And then on one side, you put the pros. On the other side, you put the cons. So it ends up looking like a T. And once you do that, you can look at, I got 6 pros and 3 cons. Now be careful, just because the number's higher on the pro side, maybe the 2 or 3 cons that you wrote down are significant. So that still may be the right answer. But it really helps kind of quantify, and then you can look at it. What are the pluses, what are the minuses? Things expensive, good mileage. Very bad reliability. You can bounce those back and forth and you'll come up with a better decision. Okay? And as we do this, the worksheet that is due in week 4, the ethical dilemma worksheet. Put some critical thinking into that. These are scenarios. They're not made up to be cruel or harsh or anything else. They're made to make you think. So do that. Shift yourself into that deeper thought process. What are the ramifications of this decision I need to make? And again, ethical dilemmas are hard because there's almost always no good, perfect answer. There's maybe 2 or 3 answers, and all of them have a downside. One of those downsides might be very significant. Do we take a loved one off of life support? That's an ethical dilemma. There's no great answer for that. A little hint at the worksheet itself. And again, I'll remind you here, just pick one of the 5. I made up 5 different scenarios. Don't do all 5, just do one. Okay. The top half, yes, answer all of it, but you'll see there's different scenarios at the bottom. Just do that. Okay. Here's one, and I like to use this in class, and I may have thrown it in, previously, just because to me it gets to this argument of, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, actually, if you look at a few different elections, I think I can refute that idea. One of them is this election that was in Virginia a few years ago, and it was a tie. I mean, no kidding, a tie. And so what they had to do, after recounting it several times, and here's the link to a newspaper if you want to read it, because it's actually factual, they drew a name out of a hat. In fact, in this case, they drew the name out of a bowl. That's how they picked the winner. So one person's vote would have made all the difference in that race. Right? And if one person wouldn't have voted, it would have made a difference. You see what I mean? And if you look through those notes at the bottom, the bullets, in the 2000 presidential election, it was 0.01%. 537 votes made all the difference because that affected the electoral vote count of Florida going to W. Bush as opposed to Al Gore. So your vote does matter. And look, if nothing else, your vote matters to you. Vote for who you think the best person is. I'll never tell you who that is. You have to decide that. But get out there and vote. And if you don't vote, I don't want to hear any complaining because you failed to do your civic duty and you're no part of the what the Constitution says. So shut up. That was a little harsh, wasn't it? It's Sunday. I'm a little punchy. Maybe a little swig of Coke here. You're not going to see, there's a couple words in here. It's really to expand your vocabulary, one, and to understand this quote I'm going to show you from Carl Sagan. It's not going to be on the midterm, but this idea of credulity. I'll believe anything. Yep. I see that a lot today. I'll believe anything I see on Facebook. That's credulity. Antithesis, sometimes antithesis, but antithesis. A thesis is what we're writing about. It's the main idea of a paper. So that antithesis, antithesis, is the exact opposite. It's too bad we don't have the class. I've done this several years now, is I'll just throw up a few questions for the class, and we do kind of a use your phone online survey system, but the last question is there such thing as an expert? And I've seen that number go down and down and down over the last few years. And the reason, the rationality given to me is nobody's perfect. What? Expert doesn't mean perfect, but it seems like we're mixing those two ideas more and more. Yeah, nobody's perfect, but there are experts out there, people that have dedicated 30, 40, 50 years of their life studying a specific something, disease, for example. So I trust them a whole lot more than I trust 24-hour news propaganda. Right, there it is. Someone with a special skill. Notice it doesn't say perfect. There are still experts in this world. And I think we should listen to them. That doesn't mean blindly follow. That doesn't mean credulity, but it means this guy has 30 years. This woman has 40 years of work in social services. Maybe she knows a thing or two about how to impact homelessness. Okay? There you go. Question. Is there such a thing? Yes. Does it mean perfect? No. There's Carl Sagan. Smart guy. Had a 20-pound brain, not just a 10-pound brain. So here's a couple quotes from Carl Sagan. So intelligence, wisdom, it's not just what we know, but how we use it, that judgment piece. I think that's right. There's some really book-smart people out there that seem incapable of tying their shoes sometimes. And I like this one. It's kind of a thought experiment. But if a friendly alien came down to Earth and looked at what we consume on TV, radio. This was written well before social media even existed, by the way, but you could add that to the list there. They might easily conclude that we're teaching them murder, rape, cruelty, superstition, credulity, I'll believe anything, and consumerism. It's kind of a damning statement on what we find engaging and entertaining, isn't it? Think about it. What's on TV? What are the movies like? And this next one's longer, but I really like it, and my head's in the way, of course. This comes from a book he wrote. You can see the date on the bottom, 1995. So it's dated at this point. It's the advent of the internet age, so he knows of it. But I'll just let you read it about what he fears for his children and grandchildren. And I highlighted in red that one sentence. Awesome technological powers in the hands of very few. No one representing the public interest can grasp the issues or care. How about that? They care more about their own re-election. Our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide without noticing into superstition and darkness. That's why that quote was at the beginning. Every time I read that, it feels like we're getting closer and closer to Carl Sagan's imagination. And so a couple of blue stars, the one that comes off of the red here, that goes up to this first one. It's not a video, it's Wikipedia, and it lists the acquisitions of Google, now known as Alphabet, right? Google got in a little bit of hot water, they changed their name. Facebook just did the same thing, right? It's no longer Facebook, it's Meta. Like that's going to fix anything. Take a look at that. Awesome technological power in the hands of very few. That's it. Right there. And you can think of a few of those. Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Sorry, Meta. Right? The second one, and I'll give you a little caution on this if you got little ones in the room. There's some rough language. It's from a 1976 movie, so it's a little bit dated too. But it's about a TV news network. And as this guy, he becomes known as the mad prophet of the airwaves. And they put him on for shock value because it generates ratings. But as he rants about how we're becoming, in 1976 at least, so enamored, so stuck to what we see on television that we're losing our humanity. As he does that, I want you to substitute TV, and he calls it the tube, right? But it's the television. Substitute the internet in his, and you may have to go back and do it a second time, but I think it's worth it. And again, I would argue it's up to us, right? It's not the device, it's the user of. But are we becoming more and more like what the character Beale, the mad prophet of the airwaves, says? So a long quote, but a lot in there. Why is critical thinking important? Well, if you go back to, remember Bloom's taxonomy, kind of this weird pyramid? When you were a kid, all they wanted you to do in grade school was this, right? Memorize your ABCs, your multiplication tables. But as you move up, you want to become able to, okay, why is that the case? Why does, 3 plus 3 equals 6? Apply it, because there's applications for that. But now as we get into critical thinking, we're up here. Analyzing and evaluating, being skeptical, going, not sure that's right, so I'm going to dig into it more. Objectivity. Without critical thinking, you never get to this level. All you do is memorize and repeat, right? Whatever Tucker Carlson said, whatever the dude on CNN said. Okay, this is a little dark there. So this, I think, will be a little bit more fun. I'm not going to hit all of these, but these are called fallacies, right? There's faulty reasoning. There are things that get in the way of understanding what's going on, not just critical thinking wise, but they get in the way of communications. So this is the bridge to the part about communications in this chapter. Okay? You can read through these. There's a lot of them. You can look them up. They're all listed. There's examples even on YouTube, but I've picked a couple for videos that you guys may want to watch, and we'll talk about a couple of the big ones. You can see all the Blue Star videos, and political ads are the best as far as fallacies. And this first one's called a straw man, and you see this all the time. You make your opponent, whether it's politics, whatever it might be, you make them look bad, or you paint them as a bad person, right? That idea of mudslinging campaigns. So-and-so's done this, that, and the other. Well, now me being so-and-so, I can't talk about what I want to do to help make this city, state, country better. I have to defend myself from that mud that's been thrown at me. It's called a straw man. Okay? Weak position, I can gain the upper hand. I'm making up a fake version of you. That's why it's called a straw man argument. And then there's a piece to this that's even maybe more concerning, is this idea of deep fakes. Because not only now can I say things about you, I can actually make it look like you are saying them. And that's one of the videos here. I'll talk about it just a little bit, but it's stunning, right? Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. I think that's the last bullet. Yep, political ads. Okay, so stepping through, I picked two, right? Equal opportunity offender, a W. Bush ad and an Obama ad. These are classic political ads. They show tone, they show emotion. There's music, there's foreboding. So just watch them. They're really short. And see what emotions are at play, because remember, emotions are part of long-term memory, and they work on us. If they hit you in the stomach a little bit, you're more likely to remember it, or maybe more likely to get mad about it. And now I got you. Okay? The other thing I want you to take note of is you go through those two at the very end, and you guys have heard this, I'm so-and-so, and I approve this message. That's because these are both political ads that were given the stamp of approval by the candidates. There's some out there that don't say that, you know, Blind Americans for Truth is responsible for this advertising. It's a PAC. It's a political action committee. And so the candidate probably doesn't have anything to do with making it. Their only option would be, hey, take that down. That's not what I stand for. Okay? But that's why you hear that at the end. Okay, this third one. You got to watch this really close. Hey, it's Bill Hader. He's a Saturday Night Live guy. He's talking to David Letterman. And he's talking about Tom Cruise and Seth Rogen and working with those guys on a movie. And when he mentions their name, or he's talking like them, his face changes into Tom Cruise or Seth Rogen. And it is so subtle. You almost are going to have to watch it a couple times. That's what's known as a deep fake. Is I can take a person, President Biden, right, former President Trump or former President Obama, take their face, manipulate it with the computer, manipulate their voice, and make them say whatever I want. I just launched missiles at Russia. And it's him, and it looks like him, and it sounds like him. It's a newish, I'll say, technology, but it's scary. And then the last one is this kind of made the rounds. Nancy Pelosi was drunk. It gained a lot of traction on social media because lies circulate 5 times, 6 times faster than the truth, by the way. But it made it sound like she was drunk. And so watch it, and you'll see how they did it. Right? You slow it down, but you keep their voice at the same level. And all of a sudden now she sounds drunk. And they compare that to the actual video feed. And it's easy to refute, but how many people are going to do that? Holy crap, I hate Nancy Pelosi. Blast all my friends. Look, she's drunk. All of a sudden now it's spreading around the internet. Either or. This one I saw in action. We can either do this or that. Sometimes, but very often the truth is there's a lot of gray in between those two choices. So there's hundreds, or at least dozens of choices. And the example I use is this comes from a speech by George W. Bush when he was president right after 9/11. And of course he had to get up and give a speech. But this was part of what he said. And as I heard that, I was like, well, I thought, you know, peaceful or robust or disagreement or debate or compromise, that was all baked into what democracy is. This is not. This is an either or. So that's where that comes from. And that's taken us down the road of Iraq and Afghanistan. This one's used a lot in ads for products. You think, red herring. That's a bizarre name. It is, but it actually describes. Look, I'll just throw the bullets up here. When you trained, they used to do fox hunts in England, right? Guys in the red vest riding horses, and the dogs would chase the fox. Well, they would train these foxhounds to stay on the scent of the fox by using red herrings. And the red herring, the fish, the smell, was supposed to distract the dogs, and it gave them the discipline to stay on track of the fox. And that's what a red herring does. It's something that has nothing to do with what's being talked about, but it makes you look over here. It's like the jingling keys effect. What? And so you stop paying attention to what's really going on. And so this Blue Star video, the guy talks really fast, but he gives a couple good examples. And remember, it's sort of like priming in a way. Remember the video about the moonwalking bear? That I make you look one way, or I prime you to count the number of passes the team in white makes, and you don't notice the bear moonwalking in the background. That's another one you see a lot. A couple emotional ones. A smart woman like you would know that this is the best car. You go, yeah, I am smart. Okay? I'm sure you're aware this is the best vehicle on the road today. Yeah, right? So that's used. I use car salesmen a lot because they do this a lot. If someone appeals to your pride, you sort of like them. It's like when they give you something, even if it's small. Hey, thanks for coming in today. Here's your free pen. Just that. Now, in human nature, there's something about us that goes, I might owe that guy something in return. Maybe, but not purchasing a $50,000 truck because you got a pen. It may keep you from getting advice or looking at the cons. A smart person like you, I'm smart, I know what I'm doing. Sold. Sign the bottom line. Okay? Then there's this. Yes, yes, yes. I ask you a series of questions. You want the best deal you can get. You want premium sound. You want floor mats. You want rust proofing. And you keep, yes, 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 yes. Then you go, you ready to sign the dotted line? Yes. Kind of works that way. So I put together a few ads off Facebook. Most of these are pretty funny. Subway ad. It's deceptive. If I eat Subway, I'll be skinny, but it works on that level. There's one. The second one is a little bit longer, but it breaks down several of those fallacies we just talked about. And you can see the emotional themes at play because commercials want you to remember their product. So what are they going to use? Humor. That works pretty well. If you remember that children see, children do, emotion, sadness, shock, fear, any of those strong emotions that we have will make them memorable. Most of the time, like Super Bowl commercials, they're generally funny or try to be. So that's why I use that. A third one, this is a little bit dated, but it captures the stereotypical what's in a commercial. And then the last one's just one of the, it's an older Corona beer commercial. Everyone's noticed you can't drink beer in an ad, right? So they're all just holding them, but they're all dancing on the beach, having fun, and they're all super skinny as a bunch of beer belly bobs sitting around drinking Budweiser. Right. So that blends us into communications. Again, it'll be this and then only one more video. So this one might go a touch long, but I'll try to keep it around the 45-minute mark. If you think about communication, some of what we were just talking about has to do with communications and the interference of. What are the pieces? There's a lot of models out there, but I think this one works. Okay, and this is one of the acronyms I think you might want to put down to memory. SMCR. I'll never remember that. What I have heard is several, in class will sit down and go, okay, make a mnemonic, something SMCR. Send me candy roses. Send me chocolate rose. Something like that, SMCR. So if you get it and you see a question like that on the test, you go SMCR. And if you can't remember that, you go send me candy roses. Sender, message, channel, receiver. Okay? Think about it. It's not very cosmic, really. You're sending out an invitation to a birthday party. You're the sender. The message is about the party. The channel, it could be multiple, right? Phone calls, text, email, all kinds of different things. How do I get the message to the receiver, the person or persons that are to receive it? Now, I would argue there's a piece missing to this model. Okay, and we'll see if we get to it here. Think about it for a minute. You think, well, that's how it works, right? I send a message through a text to my best friend. Done. Is it? Send me chocolate roses. Smoke my crack rocks. Yeah, that's not a very good one. Hey, if it works, it works, right? I'm not promoting that, by the way. Is there a step missing? Okay, so go back to the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. What's going on? Orient yourself. Bring in the facts you can. Make a decision. Act on it. What was the next step? Because it's a loop. Is you go back and observe, how is that decision working? How is my action working? And I would say that's what's missing in this. Now, it's not wrong. Send this message channel receiver. And now the receiver, hey, I got your message. Now you know it went through. That's what I don't like about texting, especially if something's really important. Send. Do you know they got it? It says delivered. It says read. Do you know they read it? And you're waiting and waiting. And don't we get impatient? It's funny. Ding. Where's my answer? Right? We expect instantaneous communication. Whereas if it's super important, and I go back to, remember, phone call and then face-to-face was the best. Now I know you got the message because I'm talking to you. And I can see how you react to it if we're face-to-face. I can sort of discern that. In a phone call, you can hear a little bit of motion come through. You ever put emotion into email that's not even there? It's like typing all in caps. It's yelling. Some people don't even understand that. Caps lock stuck on. But it comes across as you read their email like they're screaming at you. Okay? Is there a step missing? Yes. That feedback. The receiver going, okay, what I heard you say is this. And then you go, no. And you run back through it again. That's not what I meant. Or, yes, exactly. You got it. Go. Do it. Right? Yep. Feedback. Whoops. The Blue Star is just a funny, like, it's a song called What Not to Say to Your Wife. All right, so gentlemen, take heed. Ladies, you probably get a kick out of it too. This comes from an older textbook that we used to use. It was one of the pictures I really liked out of it. This is the Chinese character that stands for listening. And if you remember, I mentioned this in a previous video that written, verbal, listening seems to get the lowest level of support. What's the word I'm looking for? Right? People just don't tend to think of that as being critical, but it is. That's where the message can get distorted. Remember that game of telephone when you were a kid? You whisper the message, next person, next person. By the time it gets to the end of the line, it's completely different from what it started out as, because listening was part of that. And how do we listen? With our ears. Yeah, we got it. How do we listen with our eyes? Body language, right? You can see facial expressions. I can say the exact same thing and have two different meanings entirely. So, right, we're in the classroom. I give you back a paper and say, hey, nice job. Okay? Or I can do this. Nice job. Same words, totally different meaning. Okay? Eyes. Yes, of course, we heard the words with our ears, but the eyes were part of it. And then the heart, to me, is what's implied. And that's where we're talking about leadership with dishonesty. That honesty is a critical piece of leadership. If someone has lied to you in the past, are you not listening at least a little bit with your heart? Man, that person lied to me before. So you listen, but you go, yeah, I'm taking that with a grain of salt. So all those go into how we listen. You guys have heard me say this probably 100 times by now. Listen, think, then speak. Do we listen to others' ideas? Notice what comes first. Listen. Got in an argument with your wife? Were you listening? Or were you thinking about your stinging response, your stinging comeback? We tend to not listen that well. The Blue Star here, it's a commercial. It's for life insurance. It's got a good message, I think. And it's one of those you kind of listen with your heart about how sometimes we waste time with those around us that we really care about. It does feel cheap at the end when they're selling you something, but I think it has a good message, and it resonates. I mean, it'll stick with you because it uses that emotion of sadness. Okay? So emotion does play into listening, doesn't it? If I can change a want into a need, man, I can get you to buy anything. You need a new car. You need a new phone. Watch commercials on TV. That's what they're trying to do, is change something, and I want it. But remember what needs were. I needed to survive, right? Food, water, shelter, some of those basic things. Maybe I do need a new car if mine's wrecked and I need it for work. But remember the stinky Hyundai, man. If it's still running, keep driving it. Um, and not only do you need it, you deserve it. And that gets into advertising. That's been around for a long time. That you will feel better about yourself with this new pair of shoes. Will you? Maybe for a minute. But have you ever noticed you buy new things? Oftentimes they don't live up to what you thought they were going to be. And it doesn't leave you feel, it kind of leaves you feeling empty. I bought all this crap. I don't feel any better. It's getting a little heavy, isn't it? And recall the idea of something assisting our memory, taking you back in time. A smell, you smell something cooking, a song that you heard when you were a kid, those things. That's part of communications, right? Part of listening. So I asked this, and this will bring us toward the finish line. The last few slides are, hopefully they'll come across on the video. They're visual illusions. But how do we perceive information from our world? How do we get what's going on around us? People, they overthink it. It's our five senses. And human beings are predominantly, I want to say 70 to 75% of the information we take in comes from vision, from our eyes. And I often ask people, which sense would you least like to lose? And for me, it would be vision, of course. Emotions are part of long-term memory. I keep saying that. Sounds like a good midterm test question, doesn't it? Let me give you this just quickly. There was a study done not all that long ago. Concerned scientists. That could be anything. The objectivity is somewhat in question, but they looked at how many advertisements we're exposed to in a given day. 3,000 a day. And look how much people spend. It's probably almost up to $1 trillion. You think there's no way. 3,000 advertisements a day? But now think about where they come from. Right? We think of TV or the radio. What about pop-ups on the internet? What about billboards driving down the interstate? If you conglomerate all of that together, we are being bombarded with messages to get us to buy stuff. And if you notice, you look on the internet, you look up a new part for your car, and then you start searching around for other things, all of a sudden the pop-up, man, that part keeps coming up. So you can see where, yeah, maybe. And if you do the math, 3,000 and we're awake for 18 hours, it's a staggering amount per minute that we're being bombarded with. So this one's kind of the listening piece. It's a classic old sketch about who's on first. You can watch it, you don't have to. I think you'll find it interesting. But how well do you actually listen? And so this survey of what was most important, again, in the classroom, I actually asked this and see if we can't get the answers. I'll just throw them up here for you. But what makes a good listener? Let's put it that way. Focused attention. Psst, phone buzzes. That's not focused attention, right? Staring off into space, things like that. Focused attention. That doesn't mean burn holes in somebody's forehead, but nod occasionally. Yep. Okay. Rephrase it. That's that sender, message, channel, receiver feedback loop. Here's what I heard you say. Back to the sender. Yes, exactly. No, almost. That's close, right? And you can rephrase it. So that helps. I sometimes have trouble with this. In a back and forth discussion, you think of something, you're like, man, I need to say this before I forget it, especially as you get old. You tend to forget things, okay? But remain patient. Don't interrupt. When they get done, now you take your turn. And that gets harder with a bigger and bigger group. But that's where you need a leader that kind of helps not dictate, but direct the flow of discussion. Body language. We listen with our eyes. If you're looking at somebody and you're talking and you see them doing this, you know it's not going well, or they don't agree with you, or something. So at that point, what's on your mind? What am I missing here? Right? Give them an avenue to communicate back to you. If they're kind of doing one of these, and by the way, if you're in the audience and one of your teammates is doing a presentation sometime in school, be a good listener. Head nods, eye contact back at them. and appropriate eye contact, right? Not burning a hole through their skull. Those are things that make a good listener, how well we listen. I don't think I have to repeat this. Be calm. That's why emotion is so important. If you lose, if you get off scale because of emotion, all of a sudden now you really stop listening. Some responsibility. Make sure you got the right thing. Sometimes I just foot stomp something, right? Habits, emotion, part of long-term memory. That was kind of a verbal foot stomp. Yes, those come through. General themes. It's the outline of the textbook, right? It's the slides that we look at. They're there for you. And repetition's a good way to remember stuff too. Okay, here it is. This kind of wraps us toward the finish. I won't say to the end just yet. Fun exercises. That's oxymoronic. Patterns and visual illusions. Okay. So here's the first one. Just take a minute. Don't go back. Don't sit and count them on the page. This is a sentence. I want you to count how many F's are in this. It's a phrase. Okay, count how many F's. There you go. There's the instructions. Count them only once. Do not go back and count them again. Read through it. How many F's? Ready? How many did you come up with? Most of the time the answer is 3. That's wrong. There's 6. Every once in a while. Sometimes I'll get 5, but 3 is almost always the answer. You go, what? It's like the bat and the ball question. So why don't we recognize? Finish files. Those first 2 you get. They're right off the bat and they're F sounding. Of. Sounds like a V. Scientific. It's in the middle of the word. Okay. But there's 6. Again, this is kind of how the brain works. This one's way better in class. You can try it yourself. It makes your brain hurt when you do it. Trust me. Here's the idea. That's what it looks like. You read across, just like you're reading a book. Say the color, not the word that you read. And so the first line, red, white, green, brown. Easy because they correspond. Green, red, brown, white. Easy, they correspond. Now, color, red, white, green, brown. It's called cognitive dissonance. Your brain's kind of going, it's telling you 2 different things. That third line, say the color, not the word. And I've had people try this, and oftentimes they'll get to the 3rd, 4th line, and what you'll hear is they'll start slowing down. So the 4th line, white, green, brown, red. It hurts my brain to do it. You have to really concentrate. I don't think I've ever had anybody make it to the end without making a mistake. A couple have gotten close. But it's interesting. And again, how the brain works. Okay, IQ tests. Next, ACT and SAT tests are IQ tests, by the way, generally. So what's next? The answer is 36. You're going up by square. 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared. How about this one? If I told you it was E, would you believe it? It's the first letter counting by 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. E. It's really about recognizing patterns. And as you do more of these, the better you get. Next one's A. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. The first letter of the months. And how we recognize patterns. Those are the answers. I just gave them to you. Okay. All right, a couple visual illusions. How we could be right next to somebody, see the same thing happen and see it differently. It's how we interpret how we see events. So you can see what it says. There are no black dots anywhere on this page. Right? But anywhere you look away from that center of focus, if you stare at that very center dot, the intersection of the gray lines, there it's white. But as you move out in your periphery, they start having black dots in the middle. They're not there. It's a visual illusion. How about this one? Which gray right side, left side looks darker. Invariably, the right side looks darker to me too. But that's why I went and actually cut the two colors out of this pattern and put them here. You can see they're identical. It has to do with the contrast. This looks darker because it's contrasted with the white. This looks lighter because it's contrasted with the black. This one's tough. Give it a try. What I want you to do, see that X in the middle? If you stare at that X and keep your eyes from moving, what you'll see fairly quickly is a green dot starting to circle the page. And if you can stare at it long enough without moving your eyes, those pink dots will slowly disappear to the point that they're all gone. Guess what? There's no green dot on that page. As soon as you move your eyes around, refocus, all it is a hole in the circle of pink dots. And what happens is it's that residual kind of negative image in the back of your eye, just like film. For those that remember film, that's what gives you that kind of greenish color. That's a pretty good one. This one gives you perceived motion. If you look at it, it looks like the wheels are kind of turning amongst themselves. Obviously, there's no motion there. All right, let's finish with this. Media literacy. An older text we used to talk about it like this: how to be media literate, how to understand what's going on, not just with TV media, but now even more with social media. And personally, this is okay. This was more about how to extract things, how to do research online. I think there's a much better version out there. Okay? And this idea peer-reviewed, that somebody's actually looked at it with another 10-pound brain and said, yes, this is good, or no, your methodology was totally out to lunch. You don't know what you're talking about. Here's the one I like, and you can see where I got it. I'll put the reference down here. Access, analyze, evaluate, create, and participate. Remember Bloom's taxonomy? What was up toward the top? Analyze and evaluate. So yes, I can access it. I think we all can. But can we look at it with that critical eye, with that skeptic's eye, and evaluate? Yes, this is good. No, this is nonsense. And even more, create and participate now. So I think that is the better definition of what media literacy is. Are you? Can you do these things? This? Probably. Can you do these? I would say yes, but it takes time and effort. A little bit of time management there. And then this gets more into, I guess, your skill level technology-wise as far as creating. Certainly participate. You can do surveys, things like that online. Okay? It builds an understanding, and it lets us see through the spin, the BS, talk truth to power, set our own agendas. Okay? So if you want to look it up, there's a whole article, and that's what this link would take you to. But that's where I got this definition. It's not mine. I just think it's the best one out there. Okay, so let's finish up with a quick review. Remember the Chinese symbol? Listening with our ears, but listening with our eyes and our heart. How do we do that? What does that mean? Well, think about what can interfere with that sender, message, channel, receiver communication. I send a message through a channel to somebody. What are three things? At least think of three things that can get in the way. A simple one is just noise. But what if they don't understand? What if your message is poorly phrased? What if you're trying to cram a very complex idea into a text? There's a lot that can get in the way. Oops. What does the media use to get us to listen? Volume. You ever notice how commercials are always the loudest thing? Why are you yelling? Emotion is a big one. Because they've got to cut through those 3,000 other advertisements competing for our attention. What else do they use? Remember the slides on they're great, just do it. Those slogans, those tend to get us to listen and stick with us. This goes back a little bit. Emotions are powerful. Can we control them? How? The answer is yes. Part of it has to be that you're prepared for something that might shock you. But the idea of listen, think, then speak. Give yourself that little bit of time before you shoot off at something maybe you shouldn't have. Okay? With all of this bombardment, do we become selective communicators? I think we have to. And the trouble there might be that of those 3,000 things, messages bombing me every day, maybe I miss one that was very important. because I am so overwhelmed with what's coming at me. Okay, SMCR, think of a good acronym: sender, message, channel, receiver. Send me chocolate roses. Is there a step missing? Yes, feedback. And then we just did the definition of media literacy. Oof, under an hour. But remember, this is one of two for week 4, step 3. All right, so that gets us to the halfway mark. The next one, we'll talk a little bit more about working with a group, more time management, how that deals with stress, dealing with diversity, and then probably a quick reminder again on the midterm. Okay, and I will see you in video 11. There it is. So long.